Hey everybody, welcome to the first episode of Season 2 of The Content Barn. My name's Gary, I am the Creative Director and Founder here at Capital Content. The Content Barn is all about marketing, a few tips, tricks and a few interviews of key people in the industry around the globe, and which is a lovely segue into our guest today. So our guest is Nick Rowland, who is the Marketing Manager for NZ Rugby. Nick, how are you?
Good, very good. Going well here in New Zealand.
Yeah, cool, man. Thanks very much for being on. So the listeners won't know that it is the hottest day of the year in the UK. And we've just come out the back of a few international games where the Northern Hemisphere have done relatively well. So we'll move straight on. So Nick, tell me a little bit about kind of what you do as a marketing manager for NZ Rugby.
Yeah, so the NZ Rugby role is relatively, it's quite a broad role really, but you've got the international game as well as the more localised stuff, and then, right the way from grassroots. So for me, it's really about how do we turn the dial for our fans and our customers, both here in New Zealand, but also internationally, around our brand and the brand love that they have for the All Blacks and some of the other brands that we're associated with. So for me, it's how do we enhance that brand love and keep our fans with us on the journey that we're going on in the next few years. Okay,
cool. So your objective is audience based. It's audience and fans. Yep. It's all about those guys, right? But then the tools that you have are right from grassroots right up to international game, you're saying?
Yeah, correct. And we've had a bit of a change over, I guess, in our part of the world over the last little bit with private investment coming in, and certainly on their agenda is much more of that global audience for our brand here in New Zealand. So we have our New Zealand audience, which is very domestic focused, but then we've got this brand that, some numbers have been thrown around, 200 million fans of what the All Blacks brand is all about. So then how do we do that on a global scale? I mean, New Zealand's only 5 million people, right? So it's a pretty big audience we've got to talk to for a small old New Zealand brand down here.
Yeah, man. You guys are like a factory out there for just smashing out rugby players. It's outrageous. Do you deal much with sponsorship? Because I think you just touched on it there about international investment. I don't know how long ago it was, maybe a few years, where it was the first time that All Blacks put a logo on the jersey. And then I think it's recently changed to All Track, I forget.
Yeah, correct. Yeah, so we had AIG as the first kind of global brand.
AIG, yeah.
I think they came off Man United at the time and then came into us. I think they're now going into golf in America.
Right.
But yeah, that was our first kind of global brand that we attracted. And now, we've got the likes of Altrad, who have been front of jersey for French rugby for a few years. And also Ineos is another big global one. SAP, there's probably quite a few of the last little, 6 to 9 months that have come on board with New Zealand Rugby. I think AIG paved the way for that, right? And then now we're
absolutely. The doors opened there a little bit. And I think talking about the New Zealand audience a little bit, they tend to be, I'm speaking holistically here, they tend to be against major corporates in general, right? I lived over there for a little while, and they tend to be kind of like, this trade me. Right, instead of eBay, right? They kind of push out. They don't like it. Like NZ, NZ made is a big thing.
Yeah,
and I don't know whether there was a little bit of backlash when they first brought on AIG on the jersey, because it was a bit like, no, we don't want anything on the jersey. We're true All Blacks here. Were you part of that at all, or did you think the audience?
No, I wasn't part of that. I was probably coming from the outside, but certainly stayed across some of the developments of that from a outsider's perspective. It was interesting, and I think in reflecting what's happened with Altrad, we haven't had that kind of pushback.
No.
So I guess at the time, yes, it was a big thing. I mean, at the time, for one, it was, throwing a logo on the front of our jersey was probably a big thing, let alone it being an international brand.
Absolutely.
So there was probably a couple of things there. But I think the latest one, there hasn't been so much of a pushback on that, which has been a good thing. But because I think over time, when we've worked with AIG, they saw the good things that an international brand was able to do for us, right? And for us to reach more on the global stage. I mean, the likes of our Haka and the All Blacks brand are just about as synonymous in international markets as what New Zealand is. So
100%.
We're a bit of a leader in that space. So, that becomes quite powerful. So I think, yes, we do want to make sure we're keeping that domestic consumer happy, but also at the same time, we can...
You need to keep the board happy as well, right? Yeah, that's right.
But also, I guess those brands help us to appeal on an international market, right? Which is powerful for us.
Yeah, 100%. So let's put rugby to one side. sports marketing in general, right? How did you get into sports marketing in particular?
Yeah, so I actually just was a sports fanatic, right? So as a kid, I grew up playing sports. I was rugby, basketball, cricket. I threw the old lollipop in cricket, so gave up that pretty quickly. But into rugby, basketball, and I guess I saw what those sports did for, I guess, my psyche and the camaraderie you have with mates and all that sort of stuff, right? So I thought, I wasn't going to be a very good sportsman, but how could I still be involved in sports and kind of follow those passions? So that's probably where I started out getting involved in that side. I actually still, straight out of university, joined the betting agency down here in New Zealand called the TAB, which is a kind of our sole betting agency. It's a government kind of regulated body. So joined them and then, headed up kind of their sports marketing platform, and I guess I found the love for it, and that's where I've kind of gone.
Okay, cool. So that's a really broad spectrum there to be able to come straight out of, I'm assuming, like University of Otago or something. Where did you go?
No, I was Vic Uni, then to a pub, and then into TAB.
Cool, man. So then
to all caught up in the 20s.
Yeah. So having access to the TAB sports marketing platform, that is every sport under the sun, right? That must have been an absolute playground for you. Yeah,
it was. So I was managing the relationship with all the national sports organisations. So I think
huge.
There were 36 of them at the time, from the likes of Lawn Bowls right the way through the All Blacks, and then we started the sponsorship arm. So obviously there's a number of private teams over here: the Warriors, the Phoenix, the Breakers, that sort of thing. So I started doing sponsorship with them because we didn't have a legislated relationship with them.
Yeah.
So I was dealing with quite a large amount of sporting bodies, from the tiny ones run by volunteers right through to the multinational corporates kind of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. It's nice, again, this is when I spent 10 years in NZ, so it's nice to hear about the Breakers and the Warriors and stuff, because I worked for an agency that managed all of the marketing for the Breakers a few years back.
Nice.
And then I also worked for like a ticketing company called iTicket. I was constantly after the Warriors because Mount Smart was an open venue, quote unquote. So it was possible, but improbable. So it was fun to kind of at least get my hands dirty.
The ticketing agent for the Warriors haven't had much fun for the last few years, but they're finally getting a few games back.
Yeah, that's right. So what do you think is different in sports marketing? Is it, I think from the outside looking in, I think it's busy. It's not just one team. It is that grassroots right up to the international game for any sport, right? Is it busy? Are there too many tools to play with?
Yeah, no, it is busy. But I think the main thing that you've got to always remember is, what does the next generation look like, right? So our fans, there are fans that are paying for tickets to go along to these professional games and at the top end.
Yeah.
But then how is that influencing what happens in 10, 15 years' time? And that's where you need to kind of put some effort into. How do you get the kind of, the 5-year-old kid who's at school, who's never had access to seeing an All Black or even watching a game? How do we appeal to him and get him involved, not only as a player, but also as a fan? So I think that's one of the important things for us, is we're always thinking 15, 20 years in advance. And so therefore we need to tick the boxes from a commercial perspective and get people come and play these games. But also, what does that mean for the 5-year-olds and who do they grow up and who do they idolize as they kind of grow up through the years? And that's how we're going to get the next stage of talent as well, right?
Yeah.
Because we need that talent to keep coming through too.
Okay, cool. So there's the audience and the talent side of it as well here that you don't really see in other types of marketing, right? As a professional services, I'm not marketing to get a bunch more accountants. Right,
no, that's right.
I'm marketing to get more clients, right? Well, so
exactly.
you guys have two different types of completely different demographics. So how do you? And this sounds, a bit fast fashion, but how do you market to 5-year-olds? Is it about positioning yourself in front of the parents to get the boys and girls picking up a ball or a bat?
Yeah, well, it depends on, I guess, there's specific campaigns that go down different paths, I guess, but the biggest thing you can do is kind of grow engagement. I guess social media is really handy for that.
Yeah.
But then a 5-year-old isn't on socials. So it's really about how do we get them out into the communities and get those athletes out there to kind of help these kids create idols. And, the likes of the NBA and that sort of stuff do it really, really well, where you've got, like, especially in the New Zealand market, you've got the Stephen Adams guy who's come through the ranks, and he's performing well. But then every off-season he'll come down and he'll host 2,000 kids in a school camp.
Yes.
And it's not necessarily just about upskilling them, but it's actually, I got to meet Stephen Adams, I got his hand shaken, and here he is performing on the world stage. And that creates him being an idol for many kids who want to be like Stephen. And then you've got now this tranche of kids. Basketball's a really cool story in New Zealand at the moment, but you've got this tranche of kids like 16 to 20-year-olds, and so many more now are getting college kind of scholarships, and you will see so many more Stephen Adams pop out the other end into the NBA game.
Why do you think there's such an focus on basketball in NZ? I mean, firstly, you've got, what's his name, ex-Breakers, just taken over CEO of Basketball New Zealand.
Yeah, Dylan Boucher.
So Dylan was a CEO or the MD of the Breakers when I was there looking after the marketing. So he was a good news story, right? And I think he progressed from being in the Breakers, being a businessman, and then into the MD, right? So and now I think in the last year or two, he's now moved over as a CEO of Basketball NZ. So why is there now a big focus? Is it just a fad that you think is growing, or?
Yeah, it's a little bit of a fad, but it's a little bit of a
it's a cultural thing as well. I think NZ have that
cultural
street culture.
New Zealand has it's interesting because people always talk to me about, football's not probably as big as what it is in New Zealand as what it is around the other parts of the world in New Zealand. And it comes down to time frame, right? Because watching a football game for us is 2:00 in the morning, so no kid's going to be able to do that.
No.
But watching an NBA game, it's 1:00 in the afternoon. Half the kids at school are watching it in their PE class, right? So you've got that accessibility to the top end of the game from an American sports point of view. I think they do it really well in the way in which they, market and promote their sport, because they do it not only on the paid channels, but also, through socials, and you can kind of pick up highlights wherever you want. It's very stats driven, which is quite a big thing for young kids as well, getting involved. But I just think, Stephen's a big name, and that's probably helped the journey. Like I was at New Zealand Golf when Lydia Ko came through as an athlete, and she, again, a bit of a unicorn, but kind of came through the ranks. And the only part of golf membership that was growing was the young females. And because they want to be like Lydia.
NZ does generate, you say unicorns, but there's lots of unicorns, right?
Yeah.
It's like one in every sport.
Yeah, there is. And it's cool. I guess, in a way, we have to become fighters in New Zealand, right? Because it is such a small population. We have to fight on the global stage. And so I guess drummed into you as a kid is you do want to be the underdog, and you want to, put the fight up to move forward. So I think that's part of it. But we're always, I guess that little old country that gets left out. So we have to show our
sometimes they even get put on the map as well, right? It's shocking. It's funny, I digress, but I watched Hustle last night, the Adam Sandler movie. Right? Yeah. And have you seen it?
No, I feel like I did. I must have fallen asleep halfway through. I usually do that in movies.
Honestly, I hate Adam Sandler, right? All of his funny movies absolutely make me feel sick. But the one that he did with like a jewelry shop was amazing, right? That was absolutely outstanding. And I thought, okay, cool. Well, I'll give him another go, and I watch this Hustle, and it's about finding a street basketball player. And he becomes like the next big thing kind of thing, right? But the turning point was social media. He didn't get drafted, or he wasn't allowed in this combine, whatever it was called. But what they did is they created a hype by getting another influencer, I want to say Dr. J or something like that. And then he fronted a video, then got 2 million, blah, blah, blah. And so social media, although it seems such an old thing nowadays, when you say social media really helps, it is a big thing. It accesses to everybody, the audience is there. And I think with the likes of TikTok or Insta stories, I think it's that real-time ephemeral content that really helps with sports, and Twitter as well. I think it's that I want to know what's happening right now. Even during game and post game, I want to know what's happening right now about the person, and then during any game, I want to know what's happening within that person in that game as well. And for every game, and even if you look at something like F1, the amount of stats and the amount of camera angles that you can enhance an audience view on is outstanding. And I think that's what grows an audience, right?
Correct. I mean, as you're saying that, I think back to the 80s, right? And it was rugby, racing and beer in New Zealand, right? Because that's all everyone was kind of associated with. But as you go through the ages, and as you say, the access and the socials and things like that start coming through, kids just can choose whatever they want. And I guess because rugby was such a big thing in New Zealand, and it always has been, I guess you've got these numbers coming into basketball now because, one, there's the head injury thing that always hangs over, I guess, physical sports.
Yeah.
And then you've got parents going, I'd rather them play basketball than not. And then you get into basketball as a kid, then you've got an idol that you can watch and be associated with and, see and all that sort of stuff through social media. And it all just kind of catapults. I think, had Stephen not have been around, it probably wouldn't have grown the pace it has. But I guess he's enabled that. But also, I guess off the back of him enabling it, it would have been no good if he'd made it with no social media around it. And so that's kind of how it kind of catapults, I suppose, to the next level. And those numbers are just going astronomical. The problem in New Zealand is we can't get enough courts.
Yeah, that's
all
right.
the courts in our book,
Yeah,
so
cool.
It's a tough one.
Yeah, so, I mean that's great problems to have, right? Yeah,
exactly right.
Yeah. So what's been kind of a bit of a highlight over the years? What campaigns, what organisations, what's been the a fun marketing campaign for you over the last however many years?
One of the ones that kind of I always reflect on, and I'm pretty proud of, I guess, over the years was we. Baseball in New Zealand isn't big. We've got a big softball contingency here, and I don't know why. We've just always been a softball country.
Yeah.
We've won multiple world champs. Globally, it's a bit of a women's game, but we seem to throw the men into it, and so we do quite well. And then an opportunity came for a professional baseball team here in New Zealand called the Auckland Tuatara, and I was kind of pulled in by the board of baseball in New Zealand to help put together the professional team. So for me, it was starting from nothing. And we had 9 months to build something, right. and got quite teary on the first day when we opened the gates, and the fans kind of came in the gates for their first professional baseball game. And it was for me, it was a cool from a marketing campaign perspective. We built the brand off nothing. We've developed it. It then got through all the media. We had a PR kind of campaign behind it. Not a huge budget, but still got really decent cut through on, all the news channels and all that sort of stuff. But for me, the real, the thing that mattered to me the most, again, comes back to probably what we were talking about at the start, was this now gave our kids an opportunity to go through the ranks without having to go overseas to play professional baseball, right? So there was a pathway for them that was created. But just before the first game, we had fans come down to the field, and we've got this player out of the Texas Rangers who got signed for $2 million out of high school to play for the Texas Rangers. He's now playing for us for the off season because it's off season for them. Sure. Come down to New Zealand, and here he is throwing a baseball with this 5-year-old kid who's never even thought about what a baseball looks like. And lived down the road, and that sort of thing, and he takes that baseball home, and that's him for life, right? He's just been inspired to now try and give the game a go. And so I think that for me, although it was a cool marketing campaign and we did heaps of cool stuff around it, we built a really cool brand and got 4,000 people along to a stadium and that sort of thing. That was cool, but actually the real power came in the fact that we had this new generation excited about and engaged about a new game, which before that they wouldn't have had access to.
Yeah, I mean, that's amazing to almost introduce a new sport into a country. I mean, who has that ability nowadays, right? That's nuts to think that you managed to introduce a brand new sport. Yeah, that's crazy.
Exactly.
So who, obviously you went to university and you were not lucky, but you had a great opportunity to get into TAB and a sports marketing platform. What advice would you give to people that were in marketing or about to go into marketing, but wanted to focus on sport? Because I think sport should almost sit separate from all other marketing. They're so different, because you're right. It is about attracting talent, attracting audience from 5 to 100 years old. It's everybody. It's like music, right? Everybody likes music. Everybody likes 99% of people, right? So what advice would you give to people that wanted to get into marketing?
And advice is never a good way to start with a negative, but I think don't do it if you can't be passionate about it, right? Because if you can't get passionate about sport, then there's no point being there. You're not going to get paid the big bucks. You're not going to, sport is not going to pay you well. So as long as you're passionate about it, that's the first step. Yeah. Then I think the main thing for me, and this is what I always put in the back of my mind, is put the fan at the forefront. So if you can't appeal and make the fans' day better, their life better, their month better, make them have a better experience in what they are, who they are, then there's actually no point getting involved in trying to do any marketing. So every marketing campaign, we're always putting the fan at the forefront and thinking about them as a consumer, but also not necessarily just as a fan, but as I've kind of touched on a couple of times, as them as a player, someone that's going to be engaged with the sport, someone that's going to give their weekend up to go and play.
Yeah.
It's that sort of aspect as well. So, and I know what camaraderie and stuff can do within sport and what confidence you can get out of playing sport. So I guess experiencing that firsthand has been quite powerful for me.
Yeah.
But yeah, for me, the biggest tip is if you can't put the fan at the forefront, then you're not doing the justice of the marketing department, I guess, for that sport or that team.
Yeah, they're the nucleus, right? That's where not only not only does the revenue come directly from them, which is crude to say, but that's fundamentally where the money comes from, right? But that's also then where the passion comes from also. You've got the heart and the wallet from that single fan, right? So you absolutely.
And if you can put them at the forefront, you can do some pretty remarkable things in sport, right? Because fans are hugely passionate. You don't find many people that are passionate about a bank.
Yeah.
But you find some people that are really passionate about different sports, and that comes with positives and negatives. There's they get overly passionate. But for me, even when it's kind of getting to that negative world, you can still kind of pat yourself on the back because that fan's still passionate about what you're doing.
Absolutely. And I think, again, this is one of our mantras, is that it's all about storytelling, right? There's so many stories that you can tell from within sports, because especially from a player perspective, you just sit them in front of a nice locker room, put a spotlight on them, ask them how they got into rugby. Boom, that will inspire 1,000 kids. So that
and there's 100%, and there's a million stories about every single one of those athletes or coaches or whatever, right? Like they've all had hardship, they've all had to fight to get to where they are.
Yeah, there's an origin story behind every person in sport. Yeah,
correct.
Yeah,
and it's amazing, even as someone working in sport, to uncover some of those stories as well. Like I don't know them all, but every time you talk to an athlete or you take them on a road trip somewhere to go and do some promo or something like that, you hear a little bit more about who they are and who they are as a person. And it's, it drives a lot of passion, I guess, for me in my job as well, because you can see what they've had to go through. And it's a different mindset to anyone in the kind of corporate space, what athletes have. Yeah, especially at the top end.
Yeah, absolutely. And do you know what? One of my favourite things in NZ about putting the fan at the forefront was the Warriors releasing a branded high vis, because that was absolutely genius. The demographic fits so well with a high vis out by Mount Smart. And to put a Warriors, because they're going to wear that at work as well as at home. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That is absolutely brilliant. And I think that is about understanding the audience, putting the fan at the forefront, and then putting the brand to help generate that emotion. They're only going to wear that if they absolutely love it, and people love the Warriors regardless of how they play, right?
100%. And we when I was at the TAB, we actually did a similar thing, but we gave all the members of the Wellington Phoenix a cap.
Yeah.
Right. And it was a real simple yellow and black. They're a yellow and black team, yellow and black cap, logo on the front, put the TAB slapped on the side. 15 years ago, that would have been. I still see them.
Yeah, man. I bet
people love them.
Yeah. Honestly,
it's not hard, right? It's not science. It's really simple
appeal
stuff.
To the emotion. I dig it.
Yeah.
Hey, Nick Rowland, market manager for NZ Rugby. It's been great having you on, man. It's nice hearing the accent. Like I said, I lived over there for 10 years, and my wife has still not dropped her accent at all after being here for 6.
Nice.
So, hey, look, thanks very much for being on the show. It's been great having you. Listeners, thanks so much for tuning in to the first episode of Season 2 of The Content Barn. You can listen to all the back catalogue wherever you get your podcasts, Apple, Spotify, and Google. Thanks so much for tuning in, and we'll see you again next week. Cheers.